Gonna do it.
Well,
All
you
right.
can bring it in anytime if you want. If it's okay, you can just bring it in.
Okay, do you want to get started?
Yeah, we'll just get started.
I'll just give you a wave when I'm going to bring it back down. I'll be there.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, if I just start off generally by asking about the actual selection of the tracks, I mean, obviously with about 21 albums or so under your belt, it must have been quite difficult to narrow it down to...
No, well, I didn't have anything to do with the selection at all. It was Polydor that did the selection.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just okayed. They gave me the titles, and I okayed the titles, and that was it.
Yeah.
But I didn't have, I don't have time to do that, so I'm too busy doing other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you quite happy with the selection that you made?
Yeah, fine. Well, I mean, I've never had one of these records out before, so,
Yeah, a lot.
fine by me.
Yeah, a lot of people would say it's probably long overdue that you did a greatest hits one.
Yeah, well, I told Warner Brothers they should do one a long time ago, but I don't know they just didn't pick up on it or something. This was like in the 70s, so.
Yeah. Is it fair to say in the last year or so that you seem to have sort of crossed over more than you've done before?
What do you mean?
To a more mainstream audience? Since Avalon Sunset?
I don't know what you mean.
I mean, have you got figures and stuff? I mean, has it sold better than the previous albums?
Well, it all depends what areas. In certain areas, and maybe some areas it has. I haven't really. I don't know where it's exactly selling in specific markets or not. But I wouldn't say I've crossed over. No, I think the people that buy the albums are still the same people. It might have expanded, or I might have gone in. Maybe I think I have also a younger audience too.
Yeah.
I might have collected, but I think that's right. I don't think it's gone into another market. I think maybe just the younger audience is not buying it as well, I think.
Yeah. If you actually go straight into the tracks now, I mean, it opens with Bright Side of the Road, which from 1979. I mean, have you got pretty clear memories of the actual tracks and how they were recorded and stuff?
Yeah, well, sort of. There's not. I mean, for me, there's not really that much to remember. Just going in the studio. But if you don't want me to ask any specific questions, go ahead.
Can you actually remember what keyed off that song, or how it grew, what it grew out of?
I can't really remember exactly, but I just feeling of optimism, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's just a feeling of feeling a bit more optimistic, I suppose. That was it.
Yeah, it's a very sort of breezy, up-tempo kind of number, which and the album, I think, to generalise a bit, is into the music itself. It's quite like that. I mean, are you happy with all your albums when you look back at them? I mean, for the sake of this question, are you happy with that one?
Oh, sure I am. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And Bright Side of the Road, do you think it's... I mean, it wasn't actually a hit single like a lot of the stuff here, but do you think it's a good choice? I mean, can you see why they chose that one? It is quite, I suppose, poppy, if you want to use that word.
Well, I think it's got something to do with demographics. I mean, it's like got to do with the marketing and all that stuff. It's all worked out. So that's the way they wanted to do it. It was fine by me. Like I said, I just okayed it, and that's it. I mean, I didn't participate in somebody else. Put it together. So I mean, I just allowed them to do it because I'm busy doing other things.
Yeah. How do you actually feel when you see the finished product and it hasn't been put together by you? Like, most of your albums are obviously quite well thought out, the way they flow and stuff like that. I mean, for instance,
it's fine. Like I said, in this case, it's a best of, and I mean, you can't really have any permutations. I mean, it's once I do it, I just forget about it and I go on to something else. So I don't want to sort of think about tracks I've done, and like I said, I just go on to the next thing. I mean, I'm always working on the next thing all the time. So that's that one.
Yeah. Do you mind actually talking about? I mean, something like Gloria. I mean, does that stick in your mind, seeing it was very early in your career? I mean, do you remember the recording session and stuff like that in the detail?
I remember the session actually. It was. All those tracks were done, I think, about the same time we did several sort of tracks. So, well, in those days, as you know, I mean, I don't know if you know or not. Some people don't, but in those days, my records were very sort of short affairs. They were like done in a couple of days. So
Yeah.
that was done with a load of other songs. I can't remember all the titles, but was that the think it? No, that was the first session. There was like about 3 songs at the first session or something, 3 or 4 songs. That was one of them. And what I remember about that was funny was it was Dick Rowe. That's it.
Yeah.
I'll get it right yet. Dick Rowe, and he's known as the man that turned down the Beatles or something at this point. But I remember I was in the booth, and he came up to me because he was the producer, Dick Rowe at that. And he came up to me. I was in the booth. And he said, "Can you really like shout? Make it make it very aggressive." I said, "Sure." That's all I remember. I remember also they used to bring in at sessions. They brought in other drummers, and there's 2 drummers on this one, and they brought in a session drummer as well as the drummer in the group. And I remember the drums on this. The drummer on this was amazing, Bobby Graham. I really love the drums on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been covered quite a lot of times. It's become almost an anthem of sorts. A lot of garage bands and stuff in the States.
Yeah.
Have you heard any of the? Have you ever heard it?
I've heard a few, yeah. I've heard of not for a while. The last one I heard was Hendrix.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the Jimi Hendrix album compilation.
You also obviously did Baby Please Don't Go come out? Did that come out of the same session?
No, that was the second session. Next session.
Yeah.
Produced by Bert Burns. That was the next session produced by Bert.
And different technique altogether.
Well, yeah, Bert was more of a producer, like an R&B producer, and like he had more to do with, actually, what everybody's actually doing and separating and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In the arrangement, and also then I think they also they added on that. Jimmy Page was added on that on guitar. He's doing like a sort of a bass guitar part, but it's on lead guitar, but it's a sort of a bass part on lead.
Yeah.
He's playing rhythm on that. Here Comes the Night. Generally Bert Burns is more like into figuring it out more than he was, instead of just having it random. He was into figuring out the songs, what they needed.
Was it his idea to bring in Page?
Yeah. Well, Jimmy, I think had worked for him before.
Yeah. Were you aware of Page at the time? I mean,
I used to see him.
Yeah,
I used to see him playing with Marianne Faithfull, and he was playing Spanish acoustic with Marianne Faithfull at that point.
Yeah.
Among other things.
Yeah. What were you hanging out over on the London sort of?
No, we weren't hanging out. We just came in from Belfast to record these. We did 2 sessions. We did the first one with Gloria and Don't Start Crying Now, a couple more tracks, 1, 2 Brown Eyes, and then we came in again for the second session. It was done in a couple of sessions. That was the second one was with Bert Burns. We just flew in from Belfast.
Yeah.
And when we finished, we went back home.
Yeah. And obviously, Baby Please Don't Go. Was that your choice from your own record collection and stuff?
Well, that was just something that we were playing. I had a version by Hooker, and that arrangement was taken from the Hooker version. Originally, I thought Hooker wrote it because his name was on it, and then we discovered it was Big Joe Williams. But it was, that particular arrangement was taken. Well, that part was from the Hooker record, which I've been listening to, and we did it in the set. We were doing it at the R&B at the Maritime Club.
Yeah,
we were playing it in the set.
Yeah. And we might as well talk about the other Them track now as well, even though it's on the second side. But Here Comes the Night again, Bert Burns production.
Yeah,
but from a year later.
No, same session. That's the exact same session. They're both done at the same session. But same day even.
Yeah.
Same day.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a lot different from Baby Please Don't Go.
Yeah, well, that was more of, Burns wrote it, so he was a sort of... actually, I think he'd recorded the song with Lulu, and it had, it didn't go with that version didn't happen. And so I think he still thought it was a good song. So
Yeah.
that's why he wanted us to do it.
Were you happy about doing it?
Yeah, sure.
Had you heard the Lulu version?
No, never heard the Little version. No,
Is it in existence, do you think? No.
I have no idea. No idea.
Because she was quite sort of, ballsy, I suppose, in the early days with stuff like Shout. And I could I could hear her doing that quite easily. So then the next track, I suppose we should do this chronologically if it's going that way, but Brown Eyed Girl, I suppose, of TB Sheets.
Okay. Oh no, that off TB Sheets. What's that? I mean, I know they put this record out called TB Sheets, but it was really on the first album I did with Bang. It was on that. Right?
What was the correct title?
Of the album, it's called "Blowing Your Mind."
Yeah.
Something stupid like that.
We should clear this one up because it actually says on the sleeve notes from TB Sheets.
No, it's not from TB. That's just they keep putting out these compilations, and they change the title on every compilation they put out.
But Blowing Your Mind was your first sort of, in inverted commas, solo album after them had disbanded.
That's right. Yeah.
And how would you describe that to people who probably haven't heard it? I mean, it's quite a rare.
Well, again, it was done in 2 days. Again, that's how you did things in those days. I mean, I flew to New York and. I'm not sure. It might have even been one day. It was one day actually. Walked in the studio at about must have been 4 p.m, and by 12 o'clock at night, I mean, it was done. And then I went back to Belfast, and they just mixed it after that.
Yeah. Obviously,
it was 8-track in those days. We were doing 8-track recording.
Yeah. Had you written all the songs between the end of them and gone in the studio?
Yeah, well, I've been collecting songs and writing and collecting my own sort of material because within the context of them there wasn't sort of much I was trying some of these songs, but within that context and also the fact that I realized that I was flogging a dead horse, so I just collected these songs over a period, and then when it was time, sort of did them on my own album.
Yeah. I mean, is it fair to describe that as a transitional album? It's sort of like
no, not that one, because that album was very contrived, and actually I think the transition album was Astral Weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that one, and I did another album with Bang, which was like a total, in my mind, non-production, produced by Bert Burns. I mean, he was good when he wanted to be, but he was also lousy when he wanted to be as well, and the second album was really terrible, I thought, production-wise. But now I think Astral Weeks, for me, was the transition.
Yeah. So was the second album, the second one, was it ever released now?
Yeah, it was released as the best of.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was actually the worst as far as I was concerned. And actually redid some of the songs on Astral Weeks, a couple of them. And did to show how they really should be done.
Yeah.
Because originally when I started, it was like sort of yeah man, do your own thing. But then it sort of got sabotaged.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story, but it's too long-winded to go into, and I don't want to. It's like mentioning names and all that.
Yeah.
I want to save it for later on for the biography,
But is that where did you have a major falling out with Bert Burns around that second album?
No, not really. We didn't have a falling out. No, he didn't do what he said he was going to do. That was really it. I mean. But I mean, it's a long story, like I said. It's very involved.
Yeah. To get back to Brown Eyed Girl, obviously, I mean, it still sounds very fresh and very sort of optimistic again, even though, I mean, I don't know, it's a biographical song.
What, Brown Eyed Girl? No, not at all. No, I mean, there's very few of my songs are biographical. Very few of them, and even then, it's fragmented. I mean, some parts of your own experience you'll write into a song, and then the rest you'll make up, or wherever it's coming. Just I don't know where they come from, but I mean they're not generally about me. No, that one was at the time, somebody gave me a book at the time. Well, it started off with this sort of calypso thing. I was playing this sort of calypso, what sounded like a calypso thing, and I put that on tape, and then somebody gave me this book by Lewis Carroll. Something it was called Sylvia and Bruno or something. It was sort of like a sequel to Alice in Wonderland or something like that. And I was looking through this book and I saw a couple of names, Tuesday, So Slow, and it was sort of a combination of this calypso thing and some ideas I picked up from, that inspired me from reading this part of this book and various other things. I mean, a song comes from all sorts of things. I mean, it can come from that, teacup. It's, there's no one thing that you maybe, or unless you consciously write a song about one thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of them just come from various fragments of ideas and then, pulling the fragments together.
Oh, that's surprising. I always identified it as a song with quite a strong sense of place. I mean, that's me just...
No.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. After we leave sort of the Bang Records era, we jump into Astral Weeks, really. And that's... I mean, is the only track that you've included, that Polydor have included, the Sweet Thing?
So say it again, run that again.
It's the only track from Astral Weeks that's included.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
And can you? I mean, I can see it's one of the more sort of, it's one of the ones that you can take out of Astral Weeks and it kind of, it sounds like it could be done on its own because it's quite a cohesive. I know it's not the album that you had in mind, but it is quite a cohesive album.
Yeah, I think it's, I okayed it, so it's all right. I mean, presumably it's not going to be the sort of last best of album we're going for. I mean, there's no definitive sort of, this is the best sort of thing. I mean, that's the first one. I presume there might be more, in the future. So, I mean, for me it's fine the way it is.
Yeah. Now, you've already said that Astral Weeks was the transitional album.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you say your writing had changed in that intervening time? I mean, was it more impressionistic, more fragmented?
How was the writing change? I think it just changed from sort of a sort of a deeper level. I suppose deeper unconscious level. So more getting in touch with the unconscious. I guess that's how it changed.
Yeah.
More imaginative, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also you have to remember the times as well. It's probably too long to go into it here. But I mean, during those times you didn't have this thing about albums. This thing about like the album thing didn't really exist as an entity. I mean, an album was just a collection of singles in those days. We were going back to 66, 67.
Yeah.
And an album was just whatever collected A and B sides that somebody had. They stuck that, and that was the album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There wasn't an album as such the way there is now. So people didn't really actually go in the studio to make an album. They just made singles.
Yeah.
So like, was coming off this situation where, Brown-Eyed Girl, like that was a single, and that sort of, set me up on this, it got me through, that particular next step, from sort of being part of a group into the solo act. So it was put me through that first lesson. But then when I was recording Astral, it was something that I started to really think about then, as opposed to, actually that first album was actually 4 singles. That's what it was. It wasn't actually an album. It was like, because, Burns never thought in terms of albums.
Yeah,
he said he wanted me to record 4 singles, and I went to New York and I recorded 4 A-sides and 4 B-sides. And that was an album. But there was no conscious thinking of this as an album. So really my first album was actually Astral Weeks. That was the first time I actually did an album.
Yeah.
And so like it was, more playing time and how do we make it more interesting and certain moods and themes going through it. So that was really the stepping stone.
Yeah. And Sweet Thing itself, again, it's a record that's been covered. I don't know if you've heard the Waterboys version from last year.
Yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I think it captured the spirit at least.
Well, it captured the spirit, yeah, and I like the violin.
Yeah. So, had any other records had an influence on you in terms of this idea of a whole album? Had you heard Pet Sounds or stuff? I mean, because it was kind of conceived along the same lines.
No, I never really paid any attention to anything at that point. I mean, I was sort of really cut off. I mean, for that about a year there, I was completely cut off, living in my own sort of, just doing my own sort of thing. I wasn't really. I mean, I remember people had this album, Pet Sounds, but I never even heard it. I remember friends of mine used to come around and say, "Well, you should live," but I didn't really pay any attention to that kind of stuff. It just. I mean, these songs came out of inner, some sort of inner expression and trying to cope with what was happening around me.
Yeah.
It came out of that, It came out of people I knew, snatches of conversation, snatches of information about people's lives, conversations, parties.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. It came out of like capturing the spirit of what was happening. Well, and most of those songs I wrote in Belfast, so most of it was capturing the spirit of what was going on with my peer group at that time in Belfast. And then a couple more I wrote in New York, but it was mainly that. That's what that record was about.
Yeah. And then after that, 1970 Moondance, which the tracks that are included here are the title track, and what else is on? And It Stoned Me. Now, And It Stoned Me, I've got to ask the same question again. Is that just fragments, or is that biographical? Is that just fragments again from your imagination, or is that a...
Oh, It Stoned Me, that track. Yeah. No, that one is... that is biographical. That one is. Yeah, that one is definitely.
So it just kind of describes like an afternoon or something.
Yeah, it was
as
just
a kid.
Like it was. It was just like a sort of a walkabout,
Yeah.
A walkabout up the Castlereagh Hills. That's really what it was, and sort of meeting this old guy at the end of it. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. And how long would it take a song like that to evolve? I mean, would you go home after the experience?
No, that just came out years later. It didn't. You see, some of these things, they come out years later. I wasn't even thinking about it actually, and I was, this just came into my head, and I wrote it down, and I was thinking, oh yeah, that's. Well, it didn't come out until a long time later, and that happens with some songs. They don't. It's like cleaning windows, the same sort of thing. I mean, that didn't come out until 70s, but it was about that period of time, during the mid 60s, but it didn't come into my conscious mind until 70s.
Yeah. How about Moondance itself? I mean, it seems to have a tangible, jazzy kind of influence. I mean, were you listening to sort of...
Well, that started out as a saxophone solo, really. I used to play this sax number like over and over, and I was sort of, anytime I'd pick up my horn, I used to play this, and I'd sing. I remember, actually didn't put words to it until later, I remember, actually didn't put words to it until later, started, just one day I just started playing it on guitar, because I usually played it on horn.
Yeah.
So, then I started to play it on guitar, and I thought, and I started to get some words.
Yeah. Because it could almost be scat singing in places. It's got that very sort of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I used to listen to a lot of that stuff, a lot of the scat stuff,
Yeah.
In the early days,
Yeah. And when we get to 71...
Sorry, I'm just going to change these reels. I just hold you up.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Oh, yeah.
So, well, we'll talk about Domino, seeing you brought it up. And again, quite a jazzy sort of... Was that conceived on sax by any chance originally?
Domino?
Yeah.
No, I just came up with that riff. No, that riff was added later. No.
Yeah. Is this is this something that happens? Do the actual melodies and riffs usually come first before the words?
It can be either or.
Yeah.
You know, it varies. There's no set thing. It's sometimes that and sometimes words come first.
Yeah. And it kind of ties in very well with sort of Wild Night of Tupelo Honey from the same year.
Oh, right, yeah.
They seem to me to have the same kind of groove and sort of feel. Very effortless, jazzy. I think even, I don't know, where were you living at that time? Were you living in the States then?
Well, I was in Domino. When I was doing Domino, I was up in Woodstock when I did that. But by the next album, I was in San Francisco by the next album. So Wild Night was recorded at Wally Hyder's Columbia Studios in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you were living on the West Coast at that particular time?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you remember it as quite a sort of contented period of your life? I mean, in the myth of that time, it always seems.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's the thing. You know, the myth is not the person. You know, the myth is, I don't know what the hell the myth is. I've been trying to figure out what the myth is since I've been in the music business. You know, and. No, I mean, there wasn't any. You see, the thing was that there isn't any sort of mystery. You know, the sort of the music and the albums are what they are, and then you know I am what I am, and I'm separate from that as a human being. I'm separate from what I'm doing. You see, so like I said, I don't even know what the myth is, so it's very difficult to talk about it because I don't know. It's propagated by, you know, I suppose the industry, and pray tell me what it is. Maybe they could tell me what it is. The people that write this stuff, you know, maybe could tell me what it is because I don't know myself.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure it out for a long time and come to grips with it in some form or other, you know. But I find it difficult.
Well, obviously, the place that you're actually based does have some kind of influence on the music you make, yeah?
Well, only in terms of availability, of like what musicians you're gonna use, and that kind of thing. Only in terms of that.
Not in terms of attitude or emotion or anything like that, no?
Oh yeah, but I mean, records are, you know, I mean, I don't know. I've lost the question here. What we're trying to get?
I'm just thinking of the geography of the place has any effect on how you feel.
I'm sure it does. Well, I thought I saw that period as very intense. I never saw it as. What was it? Your first question? I'm losing track here. What was the first question?
The original question was about the myth of that time, like on the West Coast and stuff.
You said, was it something? How did you put it? Was it? I can't remember the exact.
Well, basically, did it infringe on the music you were making? I mean, were you ever aware of that?
Well, I just remember that period as it's very, very intense. It was like there was a lot of things happening at once. I mean, it's very hard to give you like a concept of this because of you know, everything changing so fast. I mean, I was sort of asked in an interview. I mean, not in a threatening way or not sort of. You know, in a way that was meant to do any harm, but somebody asked me in an interview a couple of weeks ago about something about my career. So, but I never thought of it as a career, you see, but other people do. So, I'm trying to give you an idea what my concepts or what I might talk about might be different, and what you might, you know, you pick up a Rolling Stone or NME or Melody Maker. It's going to be different than how I see it, so I'm going to have to plug into what you're trying to get at. But no, I remember that period is very, very intense, a lot happening. I was doing a lot of gigs, a lot of traveling, recording. I mean, it was just a very, very intense period. There was certainly no myth.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, you know, I was just working constantly, and I was doing 2 albums a year plus tours as well. So, I mean, it was so hectic that I remember I had to ring up Warner Brothers, and after I did that album, I had to ring them up and say, like, it's not going to, these 2 albums doesn't work.
Yeah.
Can't be these 2 albums a year plus tours. I had to, like, renegotiate my contract at that point.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember any myth. All I remember is I was just, like, overworked, overstretched, and consequently, you know, I had to stop doing that.
Yeah. So you were, was that the first time you were completely caught up in the treadmill?
Oh no, God, I mean, you're always caught up in the treadmill. Treadmill is always there. I mean, the first time I was caught up in the treadmill was when I first picked up a guitar, probably. You know, I started playing in groups and then show bands. But you know, sometimes it gets more. I mean, there was the mid '60s part was very, very intense as well. That was a very intense period. You know, too much work again. It always has to do with me. I mean, I always remember it as, was it too much work or was it average? But there was these periods that, you know, you worked very intensely and then you didn't work so intensely because, you know, you had to balance it. So I mean, I'd say from about 64 through to, from 64 right through to about 74, a 10-year period. I mean, it was just nothing but work.
Yeah.
I didn't come out of that for 10 years. Started to sort of merge out of it in 74.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I read these things about myth, I'm just as confused as everybody else. There was no myth for me.
No. I mean, obviously the overwork would affect your creative powers as much as anything.
Oh, sure.
That's the first thing to go,
Yeah, I mean, I just stopped writing. I stopped everything, you know.
Mm-hmm. And then Hard Knows the Highway, was that the next one? No, St. Dominic's, 72.
St. Dominic's was the one after Tupelo, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was still part of that intense period. So I just used to finish a record, and then the next, I'd just walk in the studio right away. I'd finish one, and I'd be touring, come back from the tour, and just walk right in the studio and start cutting tracks again. So that was done right after Tupelo, Honey.
Yeah. It sounds like an extremely different record, though. It seems much fuller, much more ambitious.
Well, I think it was more ambitious in terms of arrangements, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, the arrangements were a bit more ambitious, that's true. Yeah.
And obviously Jackie Wilson said it's been taken off. Again, a kind of riff kind of record. Begins with a riff again.
Mm-hmm.
Saxophone riff.
Yeah.
That came again the same way with the riff in the head.
Yeah, well, that came with voice and guitar first. That's how it started. I just wrote it with guitar and vocal, and I was just singing that sax riff.
Yeah. And was there any attempt to kind of offer a homage musically to Jackie Wilson himself?
Oh, that was part of it.
Yeah.
That was part of it, because, I mean, I really like Jackie Wilson stuff, you know, and, like, early on, I remember, well, that's in there when I first, you know, read Petite, when I was a teenager, that was part of it.
Yeah. And was Jackie Wilson ill at this time? I mean, were you aware of his misfortune?
No, not until later.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't until much later.
Yeah.
Much later than that.
Yeah. Did you ever get any feedback from him then on the song?
Well, I'd heard. I mean, somebody in his extended family had told me that he liked it, you know. But then that was, I think by then he'd gone in the hospital or something.
Yeah. And where was St. Dominic's? It was co-produced with Ted Templeman.
Yeah.
So where was it recorded?
Oh, that was recorded same place. It was either Wally Hyder or we used either Columbia or Wally Hyder in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it was recorded the same place. And Ted Templeman, I gave him co-production credit. And in retrospect, I don't know if it was such a good idea, because he dumped on me later on for no reason. But I gave him like co-production credit for just doing the things that I didn't want to do, like making sure it was mixed I'd send him the tapes back and tell him how I wanted it mixed. I mean, I could be anywhere, you know, on holiday, and I'd ring up and I'd tell him, you know, I want this mixed like this. So he would go in with the engineer and mix it. So I basically give him co-production credit for doing that, mixing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about that record? I mean, some people would say it's another transitional record because it kind of previewed the Caledonian Soul Orchestra era of your music.
Well, see, I don't do things in that. I just do it, and then, you know, whatever people say about it later on, they might have some more. I mean, it's like me looking at a film or somebody else's record or a book or something, you know. I mean,
yeah.
I can say, well, but I mean, I don't see it that way. I'm just doing it. I just, you know, the songs come in, and then I develop the songs, and then I record them, and then when there's enough for an album, that's enough for an album, and you put that out, and then you go into something else. That's the way I do it. I don't see them as being like separate things, you know.
Yeah. Were you sort of shedding and gathering new musicians as you went through these sort of like 2 albums a year period?
No, not really. It was very inconvenient actually when I was living in Woodstock, and I had this band that was you know, already we'd work together a lot. And when I went on the West Coast, of course, those people weren't that available when I was on the West Coast. So it was like I just virtually had to put a completely new band together overnight to do this next record. So you know, that was a very tough period then.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want to change my band, but I just found myself in a situation where, if, you know, studio time and all that, if I wanted to get in the studio, I had to ring up and get somebody, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was the predicament I was in.
Yeah. But
then later I hooked up with that band again for the live album.
For the live album,
I hooked up with them there because they're good. They were good. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But at this time you had relaxed slightly, and you were making 1 album a year as opposed to the 2.
Not by then. No, this didn't start. I mean, I didn't finish this cycle until I put out an album called Vegan Fleece.
Oh yeah.
It was after that I renegotiated the deal after that.
Yeah.
And
so I mean, when you finished something like St. Dominic's, you were already thinking about the next Hard Nose Highway. You were already sort of thinking forward as soon as you finished the last one.
Well, St. Dominic's, you were on the road, you know, and then thinking about the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was Hard Nose Highway a completely different set of musicians, or was it the same people?
Let me see. I think it was a combination. It was a combination because I brought some of the other musicians in at that point. I brought the piano player out.
Yeah.
I mean, because he actually moved there. He actually moved to the West Coast. So Jeff Libas, he was on Hard Nose Highway, and I can't remember exactly if it was the same. You mean the same as St. Dominic's?
Yeah.
I can't remember. You have to look at the liner notes.
Yeah. And they've taken Warm Love off that one.
Yeah.
Which is I don't know how you describe that one. It's quite a low key, again, bit of a jazz groove in there.
Yeah, a bit of a jazz groove and low key, and sort of I would describe it as a sort of like, you know, Motown sort of feel.
Yeah,
you know? Motown Curtis Mayfield sort of a feel, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they haven't included The Great Deception, but I mean that was almost a different kind of song altogether. That seemed to be quite a. I don't want to use the word bitter, but it seemed to be quite a sort of. You were having a go on that one.
No, I wasn't having a go. This is a misconception. I mean, you know, one never is having a go. That's another myth. I mean, that song just. I mean, anything like that comes from what you pick up, and that I was just writing down what I was picking up from conversations, things I heard, generally things that were in the air, and I just wrote them down.
Yeah.
And that's what the song was, because that's what people were saying then. I mean, you know, there were people around at that time who were saying these things in America.
Yeah.
I mean, and you just hear them say this, and I must write that, so you write it down.
Yeah.
And that song just came out of that.
So it doesn't have any of your own sentiments really in there. It's kind of, well, not consciously anyway.
Well, it's very difficult because it's. I mean, first of all, you have to perform a song. So in the performance, it can sound like that you're saying something when you're performing it because you have to perform the thing. But I mean, you mustn't lose track of this. I mean, it's making records is what it is. It's it's entertainment.
Yeah.
At the end, what it boils down to is it's making records. It's something to fill. It fills a space. It's it can fill a space for a while, but I mean, you mustn't take it all that seriously,
Yeah. Are any of these albums that you made at this time, are you dissatisfied with any of them?
No.
Or are you quite happy as a body of work?
Yeah.
Or even with you're not dissatisfied with any particular tracks or anything?
No, not really. No, I mean, I think it's. I mean, I've done well. I think as far as getting out what's been, what has been coming through. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Now, on the actual Greatest Hits album, I think it's on the CD or it's a cassette. They've included "Wonderful Remark," which is kind of a rare track. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because for a lot of people, that'll be the first time they've come across that one.
Well, that was just the King of Comedy thing. I got this call from Robbie Robertson, as I remember it, was he wanted a song for his soundtrack. He's putting together for Martin Scorsese for this King of Comedy soundtrack, and he wanted me to do a number, and he said, "Oh, got to get it together like soon, blah blah blah, and it was like over a next week sort of thing. Booked the studio, so I got a couple of people I knew, a couple of people he knew, booked the studio, and we were sitting in the studio looking at the wall, saying like, what do we do? He had some ideas, some stuff he gave me, didn't really work. And then I had some ideas I was, playing around with that I got from the film that didn't really seem to be. So I just started playing this song, "Wonderful Remark," and he said, that's the one. And that's the one we did. It was a song I'd written that I'd never put on an album.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. And he's one of the few people from another band that you collaborated with before and sung with. Didn't you sing in the band album?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So there's quite a. Do you still keep in touch with him?
Well, I saw you just sat in with me when I was in LA. Yeah, it was a couple of months ago. So,
yeah. I mean, were you? How did you feel about the band's music at that? I mean, they'd made a couple of very brilliant albums in the sort of early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Were you aware of those records?
Sure, yeah. I liked it. I mean, they were, I think they were, they had their finger on the pulse there for a while. I think they plugged into something that was going on during that particular time. They managed to plug into it and write about it, yeah.
How would you, I mean, the whole Great American, I suppose it's I hate to use the word myth again, but it seems to be quite a mythic sound that they plugged into the backwoods American type idea.
Well, it was a unique sound. It was country-ish, but not quite country, but it was their own sort of sound, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there's a kind of a leap here on the record from, we've been talking about St. Dominic's in 72, and then the next actual track that they choose chronologically is from Into the Music, which is 79.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a gap there of like 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Does that reflect anything?
I haven't a clue.
You did have
I don't know anything about it. I didn't even know that.
You did have a period though where you did, after Vegan Police, didn't you go underground for a few years? And until period of transition.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, was that a reaction to the treadmill?
Yeah, it was a reaction. Of course, it was to doing too much. It was a reaction to doing too much. Yeah.
So we've got the 7. We've already talked about Bright Side of the Road. I don't know if you want to say anything more about it, but
No, I think we should move on.
79. Now we're getting into the 80s, obviously, and 87, I think, is the next one, which is from Poetic Champions Compose. Did You Get Healed?
Right.
Just off the top of your head, I mean, how do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? That's what we should be asking. How you feel about it? You make records for other people. You know, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think there's quite a difference from the. It just, I would kind of put it together with Bright Side of the Road. It has that optimistic kind of, in the music as well as in the vocals. There's a feeling of sort of great optimism.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Well, that's what it is then. Yeah.
But are you? Did you get healed? Are you talking to yourself?
No,
It's not
talking
a
to somebody
conversation.
else.
Yeah.
Talking to you, or
Yeah.
whoever's listening. You know.
It's not actually for a particular person. That's what I'm trying to get at.
No, it's not. No.
Yeah. And after Did You Get Healed, we're into actually we've missed out. Have we missed out Cleaning Windows? We should talk about that from Beautiful Vision.
Okay. Yeah.
Which has got to be biographical.
Yeah. Well, that one is. I've done this before. I think I did it in your last interview. I've done this.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of these before in interviews, and it's. You want to talk about that?
We should talk briefly about it just for the sake of this radio thing. The thing that strikes me about it is there's a great fondness for the sort of Belfast speech and speech patterns and stuff, and the 5 Woodbines and the Paris. Maybe we should tell people what Paris Buns are. American.
Well, that's just a brand name.
American listeners.
Yeah, Paris Buns is a brand name. They're not actually from Paris, but I used to think they were, but they're not. It's just the brand name. Yeah.
They're just.
It's just the brand name. Yeah.
They're just like a Northern Ireland sticky buns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And could I ask you who you talk about? Christmas Humphreys.
Yeah.
Any detail about him? Any biography?
Well, he's written a lot of books on Buddhism. He was an authority on Buddhism, and he was like the leading exponent of Buddhism in the UK.
Yeah. And you'd got somebody giving you a book or something for a present.
Yeah, well, it was all sort of tied into the same kind of period. That time was, the beat thing. We have to go back and see that's terminology again. We're dealing with terminology again. This is that would come from beat era. That's all beat era. Ginsberg, Kerouac, Ginsberg, that time period. Zen Buddhism was all tied into that.
Yeah.
And Christmas Humphreys was part of all that thing.
Yeah. And you were actually, the actual Cleaning Windows, is it fair to say that's one of the few proper jobs that you had when you weren't doing music? One of the few.
No, it wasn't a proper job. I had a window cleaning business. I owned one.
Yeah?
I owned a window cleaning business, yeah.
Around Belfast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, East Belfast.
For how long did that last?
Oh, God, I owned it for a couple of years, a few years.
Yeah.
And then when I started playing, touring more, I was touring more then. My cousin was doing it for a while, and he couldn't do it any longer, so I had to give it up.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to give it up. I wanted to keep it going, but he had to do, had something else to do, so he couldn't keep it going.
Yeah. So you just go around the neighbourhood, basically, or was it a
No, I bought it. I actually bought a window cleaning business, and I was the president of a window cleaning business, and I had people working for me.
So it was Morrison's window cleaners? Or?
No, it wasn't. No name.
No.
Not any name. It was just I just bought this window cleaning run, and that was it. End of story.
The other thing I got to ask you is there's a line where you say I was down the bottom with a V.
Yeah.
What's
V?
the V?
That's a letter. You use a letter on fanlight windows. You have to use a V letter.
Just a small.
It's called a V. The
Yeah.
letter's called a V. use a big letter for, extension letter for tops and use V for on the bottom. The collector from the lid, clean the fan light inside out. It ties in with that because you have to use a V letter to do the fan light.
Yeah. And again, did that song come years after the actual experience?
Yeah.
It just sort of came out of your subconscious?
Yeah, there's no time scale for writing songs. Songs can be about anything at any given time, any subject, whatever. I mean, there's no time scale,
Yeah. So I think that more or less finishes, apart from the last album on Sunset.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. Have I Told You Lately is one of the 2 tracks. And I suppose, well, you got Georgie Fame and the boys behind you for this one.
Which one?
On that, Have I Told You Lately?
Oh, Georgie wasn't on that one.
No,
that was before he came in on the same. No, yeah.
So how do you feel about Avalon Sunset? I mean, it's only been out a year, but you seem to have got a resurgence on the back of that album. You seem to have got a resurgence of interest in touring and stuff, and you seem to be quite enjoying yourself on the road again.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there is no sort of ultimate fix on any of these kind of things. I mean, you take one day at a time, and then next day after that, and one day, and you just take it like that. There's no answer. There's no fixed thing. It's just you just go along with it, try to flow with it. That's it. And hopefully meet some interesting people on the way. That's about it in a nutshell.
You told me one time that the thing about touring was that you had quite a low threshold.
Oh, you're talking about touring?
Yeah.
I thought you meant the whole thing as a whole package.
No, the actual idea of coming back and
well, I've been all over this before. Well, okay, I'll do this again. Touring, yeah. Started touring very, very, very young. 15, I was on the road. I spent years on the road, living out of a suitcase when I was from 15 to about 22. I was permanently on the road. And then I was living in hotels for years. So I mean,
No, but
does that answer the question?
No, what I'm trying to get at is...
Yeah, well, that's about the tolerance level.
Yeah.
Because I did all that. And, I don't want to do that anymore, so I don't want to waste my life touring because I did that early on. Does that answer it? Because I've been over that one a million times.
Yeah. But are you happier? I mean, at the minute, you seem to be enjoying playing live quite a bit. I mean, are you going through sort of a positive time?
Well, like I said, it's one day at a time. I mean, some days are good, some days are bad,
Yeah.
That's the way, it's life. It's the same as life, It's the way it goes. There is no ultimate. I don't know. I'm just taking it as it comes,
Yeah. And the last song is Whenever God Changes Light, which is the Cliff duet, which actually got you in the charts again.
Yeah.
And actually, I suppose we should talk about Queen of the Slipstream. That's an extra track as well. But Whenever God Changes Light, it's like gospel influencer.
Whenever God Changes Light. Well, yeah. Well, if it's a song about God, it must be. Well, I just wrote that song, and if it's gospel, that's what it is. I didn't mention Full Force Gale. That's gospel as well. That's on it. Full Force Gale is on the album.
It is.
Because that's a gospel track, but I did that before. But they're just basically the songs that I write, and if they come out, as gospel, fine, whatever. Ry Cooder's on that one, Full Force Gale.
Yeah.
He does a good solo on that. What was the question?
Well, I was going to ask you about the gospel thing, but
yeah.
That's not, if it just come out like that, it just come out like that.
Yeah, I get fed up answering these questions, because it's, it's whatever you make it, if it's gospel, fine,
Yeah.
I just do the work. I don't,
I don't analyze it.
The work is what I do, that's what I do, and I do it. I just, do the best I can do, and after that, that's it. I don't want to sit around analyzing what I'm doing. I'd rather get on with the next thing,
Yeah. So what is the next thing? We may as well end off with that. Have you got new projects in the pipeline?
Same thing, another album. That's it.
Mm-hmm. With the same people?
Same people. Some of the same people, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the same people.
Yeah. Anything else? Anything we've omitted?
Nothing I could think of. No, I mean, most of these questions I've answered before, so there's nothing new for me. This is all old stuff for me. So,
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I was hoping maybe to get something new, but I can't think of anything. So this is all old stuff for me. I've done it all before.
I know.
When I did the albums, I was asked the same sort of questions, so it's all in interviews.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was under the impression it was just for American listeners.
Yeah, well, if you can
yeah.
cut it up somewhere.
Yeah.
But to me, I'm falling asleep right now.
Let's have a think about what we're doing.
Well, is there enough? That should be enough. You know, cut
I'd
it
say
up.
it would be enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably wasn't the best idea to track by track, but that's the briefing I got beforehand.
Well, I don't know. Don't know any other way to do it. You know.